So on the call right now, we have Catherine Swenson from the Chancellor's Office. It sounds like John just joined us.
He did. He still hasn't gotten an email, so something about our email system's down. Sorry about that.
That's not good. Sorry to hear that, John. And just joining us is John Avakian from the Chancellor's Office. Both Catherine and John are from Economic Workforce Development program at the Chancellor's Office. And speaking is Jim Kiggins from the Serious Game Design Institute at Santa Barbara City College. Joining us is Dr. Anna Laura Jansma, who is our communications researcher and subject matter expert designer of our WorkPlay workforce virtual workplace training sensitivity game, and she's also one of the instructors that leads the instructor-led training. So Anna Laura is going to be with us for the demo and to talk about the design. And then also two members of our production team who help with our game tests, Cecilia Mason and Ty Hegner. So that's who's on the call, and I thought maybe the best thing for us to do, if you don't mind, Catherine, if you could tell us a little bit about your background and what your interests are, then we can kind of slant the presentation to best address that.
Great, thanks, Jim. I am actually currently the director of the Economic and Workforce Development Program's Training and Development Project, and in that I identify and deliver training and other interventions to help community college economic development practitioners do their jobs better. And so one of the things that I've had an interest in, and I've talked with John about a few times, is alternative methods of delivering training for training and development other than stand-up and face-to-face. So using some of the technology besides, web technology and things. Are there more engaging ways we might do it? Might we set it up in games? Might we set it up so that people can enter and do it as they have time rather than on scheduled times? Just trying to look into some alternative methods of delivery. And then coincidentally, I've also tried to secure statewide contracts for training for the community colleges, and I'm working with a client right now that's a very large insurance company that has an interest in their trainers doing virtual instructor-led training as well, and using alternative methods of doing training within their organization. So looking at possibly doing a train the trainer for that organization's trainers internally as well. So that's my interest primarily, is looking at instructional design, development, delivery, utilizing alternative methods, and what would be the best for our programs.
Great. Well, I think that it just kind of a happenstance that I think that we have a presentation that is probably going to fit your interest pretty well. And what I'd like to do is, just because it's easy, is to go through some slides that talk about what we're doing and how it's designed and what it does. And then after we've gone through the slides, then we'll show you how it works.
Okay.
So then, for everyone's warning, we are recording this for posterity so that anyone could have this link and then use this presentation to show it to anyone else that might be interested. And one of the caveats is that some of the tools that we'll be demonstrating we'll be doing by screen sharing within our webcasting application here, and it's a very useful demonstration, although the frame rate's a little slow, so sometimes it can appear a little bit jerky, but you can definitely clearly see how it works and what the benefits are, and then it's something that's easy for other people to see regardless of how meager their bandwidth might be. So I have quite a few slides, and I'm probably going to go through them pretty quickly, and if I go too fast, please just interrupt me. That way you can have this recorded for later and go through any section of this that you might want to.
Great, thanks.
So we have a multimedia entertainment initiative funded center here that's hosted at Santa Barbara City College. It's the regional center for Region 6. And we have also had a Responsive Training Fund grant project for the last 18 months here. And that grant project was to develop digital game-based training for game industry professionals that would be delivered and occur in a online multiplayer training environment. So that's been where all of this has originated from. And as a result, now over the last 18 months here at Santa Barbara City College and MEI Region 6, we've developed a organization that we call the Serious Game Design Institute. And we have some capacity now as a result of our RTF project. And that capacity is that we can develop and have developed digital game-based professional development training ecosystems. And by ecosystem, I'm talking about a training system that is very encompassing and fully integrated. So our communications tools, our learning management system, our games are all fully integrated and talk to one another rather than being separate electronic components that you would use. So we're specializing, and this is something of this is somewhat of a landmark, that we have developed an online multiplayer training environment that's delivered in the web browser, and it's for virtual workplace training. So there are other technologies that are available, whether those are massively multiplayer training environments like you might see from Forterra, their Olive system, or most people are familiar now with Second Life, and that kind of server technology, which does not occur in the web browser but instead uses a client that you have to download to your hard drive and then use that to access the server. So our specialization here is in tools that are all part of an online web delivered learning management ecosystem. What we've been developing over the last 18 months is we have a management trainer, our WorkPlay sensitivity trainer, and that's an online multiplayer. That's an instructor-led environment, although I'll also show you that we have a design for a single player versus computer versus AI example. We have a game tester pre-certification game that we have been working on, and that's an online single player. That's a single player versus the computer. We have an online multiplayer for human resources new employee onboarding, which is a takeoff from our online multiplayer for workplace sensitivity training. And then we have a student-powered production, which is called The Pyramid, and Cecilia has been the game designer on this project. And it's a game for diet health education, and it's an online single player. What we have at SGDI is a production team that has been dispersed globally, literally. We have team members in Paris, we have team members in North Carolina, Texas, Wisconsin, Washington, and various locations in California. So we have some tools that we have developed to be able to work at a distance, which have also helped us to develop learning management system tools that help you learn at a distance. At the core, and I think that this might be very useful for the kinds of training that you would be interested in, Catherine, at the core, our products are database centric. So we start with the learning objectives as the design foundation, and those objectives and their assessments are identified. The database is designed to support that, and then the game arises from that design. So from the very beginning, our single most important function is to acquire data that shows us outcome performance relative to data acquired about learning objectives and learning that we've observed. Something that we're doing that is definitely also a landmark is that our training games are embedded in our Moodle learning management system. So rather than having games that are external to Blackboard or Moodle or eCollege or whatever your learning management system might be, our game is actually embedded using the SQL database in the Moodle, and activities from the game can be observed in the Moodle instance. So if you have an online course for a training client, then they actually use the game as part of the online course along with all of the other components that you would find in an online course. And as I mentioned, they're delivered in the web browser, and everything is about leveraging the best of digital game-based learning. So they're scenario-based, experiential learning, and we're focusing to every extent possible on intensive engagement. So our objectives when we started developing WorkPlay, we wanted to be able to take the best of video games. So we wanted to be able to use the visual accuracy and the physics and be able to obtain real-time data. We wanted it to be immersive and engaging. It needed to be easy to learn to use, but we're also targeting the competitive nature of the learner. It's situated in the environment that the learner is supposed to be applying these new skills toward. And it has some game features. It has game balance, it has game symmetry, and it provides lots of opportunity for feedback, both immediate formative feedback and long-term summative feedback. So this is then kind of the gestalt of these learning objectives of our game design going forward. I have a slide here about assessment that's I put at the front instead of at the end because really the assessment is what we're concerned with. So who's to be assessed and what are we assessing and how are we going to achieve that? And the number of slides that I'm going to go to next are going to show you how we have created a way to identify the objectives, design around them, and then acquire information. I think one of the more interesting things that we've developed is a system for assessing attitudinal response. How do you feel about your training? How do you feel about yourself? How do you feel about your organization? And then being able to measure that pre and post. So the game that we're going to show you has these components. We do onboarding, where we have a system that's a PHP, that's a web programming language that allows us to bring the trainee into the system, and when we do, then they're in the entire system, so that we only have to onboard them once, and they're able to use our game, and we're able to use our assessment tools, and they're also in the learning management system. After they've been onboarded, then we give them a pre-assessment mapping, and we're going to take a peek at that in just a second. Then they do the training in the game, and while they're in the training, we have some immediate feedbacks that games are great at giving us. So we have in-game scoring, we have real-time training feedback from the trainers to the learner. At the conclusion of the game, the learner builds a scenario, and that's another innovation of ours, and that is we have uncovered in our research in measuring our game success that one of the things that happens is that learning by designing is one of the stronger features of the training experience. So after you have completed this sensitivity training, then your task is to create a scenario where you take something from your own experience that you have seen in terms of harassment, discrimination, ageism, whatever it might be, and you complete this assessment and build your own scenario, and then that is incorporated into a system library of all learners. So you can go back and you could use those for your own training activities if you wanted. Then we do a post-assessment mapping, a snapshot, and we have some community tools. So we have an intro network, which is a social networking tool that has some very interesting features. And we also have our Moodle learning management system, which supports our learning community. The features of the game itself is the trainee gets to choose whether they're going to see the game in the first or third person, and they can select that whenever they want to make that change. They set up their own avatars, so then they have a personalization factor. There's a tutorial scene where they practice moving the avatar around, operating cameras, using the interface. And we have an avatar imaging feedback so that the trainers provide feedback that the learner sees in their window where their representation of their avatar changes posture and idle animation. So if you're playing well, your character is happy. If you're playing poorly, your character is not happy. We have a traits feedback, which is a group of sliders that are set by the trainers to indicate behavioral traits. We have cutscenes, and these are times when you come out of the live game and you have an interactive where you watch a video, and then as a result of watching the video, which is about the training, then you answer some objective questions. So those are objective measurements that we're taking during the game that are also part of the summative evaluation for the learner. The game is a mission design, so at the beginning of the game you have a mission that you're on, you have goals, you have objectives, and then that's what drives you as the learner to progress your way through the game, and also is somewhat competitive because it's scored. We have engagements in the level, so as you're working your way around the virtual company, there are different kinds of engagements for you to experience that build the game experience. And I mentioned the scenario builder and our social networking. So this is the entire game sequence, and it shows each of the scenarios and the various steps that you go through. So you go to the login and you create your profile and you do the tutorial, then you set up your avatar, you go into the game, you have a cinematic that explains to you what your mission is, you arrive in the lobby, which you're going to see in a moment, and then you go to you're asked to go to the office, and before you enter the office there's a cutscene that gives you an objective assessment, and then you do scenario 1, which is an ethnicity scenario that happens in the office. And then there's 4 scenarios, and after you do the 4 scenarios and go around the facility, then you exit the game and go to a PHP console, which is like a chat, and you do a debrief with the 2 live trainers. After that, you do the scenario builder, then you take your assessment map shot, and then you are completed and you can join the Intro Network community. While this is somewhat esoteric, I think that it's useful to be aware that the way that the game works is that there's a server that's using a database, and an enterprise massively scaled quality database, a SQL database, and everything that happens in the game is about the user and their response, and it's all designed from the beginning around the database. So we design the database to be able to get information that we want from the user about the kinds of activities and choices that they do and make, so that we can assess whether or not the objectives that we're trying to achieve are occurring. Again, this is a somewhat esoteric slide of our architecture, and what's meaningful about this is that the assets that allow the game to happen occur in a traditional web server topology. So then as the trainee or the trainers, you access the game by using your personal computer, and you operate the game in a web page, and all of the components that the game requires live on a server, and you could complete this game, you could play the game or deliver the training virtually from anywhere on the planet. This was the team that we had in place over the life of the RTF grant. The team's no longer in place because that project now is completed. We have key members of the team that are still in place, most of them are on this call, so that we can take the technology that we have developed over the life of the project and now be able to apply that to other purposes. One of the things that was really a joy in doing the project was that we discovered there were tools that were available for education at a cost savings because of our educational status, that made it possible for us to do something that was quite a bit more expensive than we had budget to do. And this Perforce asset management system is a really good example. Typically, for a company to be able to have this asset management system at their disposal to work virtually as a team distributed across the globe, that's about $80,000. And this tool is available to us, and it's still ours. We pay nothing for it. We get it free for education, and we have and amazing technology as a result of this. This allows people to work at a distance and share information, whether those are files or documents or whatever they might be, and keep track of who's been doing what to who, and it's impossible to overwrite somebody else's work. So this has been a core part of our success and will continue to be going forward. Here's a screenshot of WorkPlay from the Moodle. So if you wanted to add a game, then in the Moodle Learning Management System, you would select game as an activity that you would like to add to your online course. This is a shot of the game console. On the left you can see the setup for the trainer and who the trainer is and who the assistant trainer is and who the trainee is and the avatars that they are going to be wearing when they are in the training. And then there are a number of editing console panels that are available that allow the master trainer to go in and set up everything that he or she wants to change or customize about the training activity. The environments that are going to be used, the kinds of emotions and actions that are available to the avatars, and what avatars will be used. And this is completely custom. We built this from scratch. And this is using the SQL database that we designed, so this makes changes to that database. This is the assessment mapping console, and I think this is perhaps the most innovative thing that was constructed in the project. So what this tool allows you to do is you can identify some domains, whether you wanted to measure 1 or 2 or 5 or 6 or more. You can identify domains that you want to measure the attitude of your learners, and you can label those domains. And then after you have identified the domains that you want to label, for instance in our WorkPlay domains, we're measuring I am, I do, I feel, I'm good at, my personal interactions are, my organization is. Then you identify keywords. The trainers do. They identify keywords that are weighted for each domain. And that weighting allows us then to get a survey sample from the learner where they indicate their attitudes about these various domains. And by using this weighting against a norm reference, then it shows us a map, a visualization, which you're going to see next, of how they feel about themselves and their organization and their training. So this is a shot of that assessment mapping visualization. Right now, the icon that I happened to click on when I took this screenshot is the one in the center, and it shows the identifier for that learner. Those faint blue lines that you see on the grid show the division of the domains. And the curve that you see that's illuminated is plotted by the points averaged from the weighting keywords that this user selected for each of these domains. Their icon appears in what's called the Berry Center, which is the volumetric center by calculus of the representation of this curve. So what this allows us to do is it allows us as the master trainer, as the trainee, or as the person responsible for the organization and the training, to see the attitudinal response of everyone that's been involved in the training. Here is how they feel about each of these domains, and this is where they're situated relative to everyone else that's been taking the training. And another feature, although we can't see any difference in this screenshot, is that these icons are colored, their material is colored by their score in game. So when they take this assessment at the post-training, if they have a very high score as a player, then their avatar is a rich gold color. If they have a low score, then their avatar is desaturated. A really low score would be gray. So then this allows the master trainer or anyone else that's interested to look at a map of the outcome of this training and also identify how the players scored in the game as compared to their attitude. So you may have someone that has some fringe feelings and yet still scored very highly, or you may be able to identify in your organization that, well, we have a cluster of individuals that have a tendency toward this one negative domain aspect, and it also so happens that they scored very low in the game. Is this totally cool or what?
It's totally cool. It's pretty impressive.
So this is a cutscene shot. So we have videos that play in the game, and these videos were live actors. So Dr. Jansma and Jill Scala, our other communications researcher, wrote scripts for these scenarios, and then we had them filmed here on campus by our film department chair and his crew. And you watch these videos, and they're about the various scenarios that you're going to play out, and then you answer questions based upon them. So then here's a shot in game. This is our master trainer, and in this particular case, it's Julie, and Julie is in her office, and this is a shot from inside the office looking past Julie, and you can see the break room on the other side of the shot, and we can also see the chat dialogue on the lower left, and then some interface controls on the right that allow you to indicate your emotional response as you're doing the chat. This is a shot from the break room, and it shows the avatar imaging window in the upper left-hand corner. By the way, one of the things that we did as we were creating our team is we developed a Second Life island. And the purpose of developing the Second Life island was so that we could use it for rapid prototyping. It's not the place where we wanted to do the training for a lot of reasons, and that's a whole nother presentation unto itself. But it did provide us very quickly with a place that we could do some initial gameplay. And very early, like a year ago in the fall, we had our two communications subject matter experts working with gameplay testing in our Second Life island while we were still trying to figure out how we were going to, build this online multiplayer that we built that was custom. So we were able to do gameplay trainings in the fall in parallel with us actually building the game. And I think this is kind of an interesting occurrence now that we're going to see more of in digital game-based training. And then this is a screenshot from the break room that was developed in the Second Life island, and it's still there. One of our grant partners that we served is a serious game company called Alelo in Los Angeles, and they are the winners of the Serious Game Showcase and Challenge from 2 years ago, and they have a very impressive product called Tactical Iraqi, which is a game-based language trainer, and it's for the Department of Defense and NGOs that are deploying to Iraq, and that's their primary customer, and it's a very impressive product. And we did some cross-pollination in our partnership with them. So they were very interested in what we were doing in terms of the workplace training. And then we also were able to obtain some very interesting design information from them. So as a result, we have taken one scenario, and Anna Laura and Jill, our SMEs, did a branching single player versus AI diagram of what these workplace training games would be like if you were not instructor-led and instead were playing this as a single player versus the artificial intelligence of the computer. Although we haven't developed this yet, this is one of the things that we're interested in developing next. Wow. Okay, so there's the end of those slides. Catherine, are there any questions that myself or Anna Laura or any of us can answer for you before we move on to the next thing?
I don't think so. I think that it's just kind of it's completely out of my realm to even know what question to ask.
Okay.
So I think the background that you've provided and how it interfaces and the feedback and all of that is very impressive. So I wouldn't know what kind of question I would even need to ask at this point.
Well, we'll be standing by post presentation when the questions start to arise. Oh, gee, what happens, or what if, or because
Right.
that typically happens. So I'm going to turn on some screen sharing here.
Catherine, one of the questions that you might have might be something about objectives that you're trying to accomplish when you do the training, when you train the trainers, etc. What kinds of things you like to assess them on, and the ability for us to come through and provide that type of same outcome for you.
So what we're looking at now on the screen is a web browser that shows the end result of this is the visualization live. So I'm going to use my camera controls so I can page up to zoom in, and you'll have to excuse the rather poor visual quality that the Acrobat system has to reduce to so that it can fit across the bandwidth. This is actually quite a pleasing graphic. I can orbit my camera, which allows me to change my view, and then I can interact with each of these icons, and as I do, then it tells me what learner I'm looking at, what visualization, and it also plots the curve that shows how that particular learner happened to respond to the questionnaire about the selected domains. Some of the features that we have developed because we felt that they were really important, and now having done so, I think there's some tremendous power at bear here, is you can now customize this so that you can set up whatever domains you want, and you can name them whatever you want. And you can also, for each of those domains, change the keywords whenever you want to whatever you want. And it's completely customizable by the trainer and the training organization. And in the end, what it gives you is this visualization of being able to identify where all of your learners sit emotionally in response to the training. One of the things, this grew out of our relationship with Mark Sylvester and his company Intro Networks, which uses a social networking algorithm to map the learner, not the learner, but the member's location in a pin diagram. And that's kind of where this came from originally. But we needed more. We needed to be able to change the domains and change the words, and we wanted to see it in a three-dimensional kind of a sense. Something that you could just as easily do with this as we're seeing in this map is, if we wanted to, we could populate a 3D environment by emotional response. So if we wanted to send all of the learners that feel X about Y, we can populate them into one room. We can take all the learners that feel Z about M and populate them into another. Because what we're doing is we're looking at the data that's in the database as a result of filling out the PHP form, and then the resulting visualization here in a 3D sense. So Catherine, I'm curious to, and I'm sure that Anna Laura is as well, to hear your feedback on how useful or not you think that this kind of a feature would be in corporate training.
Sorry, I was on mute, so I wouldn't make it. Well, I can see where it would be really useful. I'm kind of having, because I don't know the language well enough, and so I'm kind of probably not your best client to be, the one assessing it, although I can certainly see how, full and rich it can be and what it could be used for. I'm kind of struggling with how, for example, just this diagram that you have there, what is that telling us? What does that diagram mean? Is that all one learner that's standing on those points, or is that a learner compared to other learners?
So this is a visualization of 3 learners in the system in respect to the norm references of the weightings of the words for each of the domains.
Okay.
So if we were to set up 3 domains, let's say, and these 3 learners, their response was they had selected what we would consider to be the ideal 10 words in each domain, then these 3 learners would all be gathered in the center of this diagram, and their resulting curves would be very small because they would be very close to the norm. In the case of this particular, like I'll click on this learner right here. Learner number 3 has intersections with these 2 domains that are way out on the boundary. So their responses are not at all close to the norm reference. They feel in a way that we're not desiring that they feel about those 2 particular domains. But the intersection with this domain is much closer to the norm, as is this intersection. So it gives us, at a glance, a visualization by clicking on any one of these 3 learners in the system of how they feel about themselves or their organization or the training that they just did. And Laura, did you have any questions that you wanted to ask Catherine before we moved on?
With regard to this, yes, actually. We're curious, Catherine, as to whether you think people would be motivated to answer, to get on this map, whether they would like to see themselves and where they are in respect to others. We feel they would be, but you're in the trenches with a different group doing training. Would any of the corporations you're working with, any of the people that you're working with, do you think that they'd want to answer some questions in order to place themselves on this map and see how they sort of stack up compared to others?
I think people that I would provide training to utilizing this kind of technology would definitely be interested in where they place and where they are in relation to others. I can see where in an organization it might be, I think it would be of interest to people, but I don't know how the organization might use the information, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. So they see somebody who's way on the outskirts of this chart, for example, and not thinking along the same lines as others. What do they do with that information as it relates to that individual? You know, is that something that that they need to know, that they should know? You know, how would they, you know, what would be the, you know, the parameters for use of that kind of information?
Well, one thing that they could do is if they see that someone is an outlier in a particular area. So, for example, you can see whatever number 2 here that we've highlighted on has clicked on this dimension that is closest to us, that it reaches pretty far from the center, which means it's pretty far from where we would expect it to come in. So maybe say that that's a person who maybe feels isolated within the organization, and so their responses led them to be way out there, whereas others might feel very much a part of the organization. So it shows a way in which they differ. The people, the management who are using this could then, not by name, but by identifier, say, gee, we've got someone over here who feels isolated. We might work with them on team building skills or something along that line, and they could actually customize certain scenarios or select certain scenarios for them to go through that might shift them on that particular dimension. Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
We thought that people would want to get on kind of as a social comparison. We always like to know how we stack up against others. But also, it's really nice to see in which particular ways we don't blend in with others. So it's nice to see if we're the only ones who are feeling isolated, or if we're the only ones who think that we're qualified in a particular area or something like that.
And this is the tool that is used in our system for getting our pre-assessment attitudinal and post-assessment attitudinal. So everyone that's going to be involved in the training goes into that panel and they select their words that indicates how they feel about each of their domains, and then we have this snapshot of the training before it begins. And then we have them do the same thing post, and then we can compare both trends as well as individual performance.
So with any luck, by going through the training, they'll feel a little more qualified in terms of interacting with others in awkward situations, perhaps a little more strongly that their own communication is clear. They might feel a little more respectful of others. Some of the goals that we're looking at, they might feel a little more knowledgeable of application of the law. So we would be able to show that by a pre-post comparison.
Right.
And I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
could see that if it's based on, the actual learning. This one, however, is an attitudinal assessment,
Right.
correct?
It's a self-report. It is. It's their self-report of I do, I am, I feel, my organization is. Right. It is. It's a self-assessment.
Can I ask, this is John, can I ask a clarifying question along those lines? What I'm understanding out of this is the result of the pre and post testing is specifically oriented at this point, and you're demonstrating related to the workplace sensitivity training that you have done and intend to do. This is not as much necessarily related to any other type of training. It's just that one could measure and demonstrate progress in learning by assigning different characteristics to the various domains. Is that right?
That's absolutely right. And one of the things that I'm really excited about, frankly, is that this tool that we've created would be applicable in any training that we may want to create. So for example, let's say that because I happen to be working on a hospital environment, so we're going to do some training for nurses and healthcare workers, and we're going to use the same interface, different characters, different environments. It'll be a hospital instead of a business place, but this system would be exactly the same. But instead of having these domains that have been identified by Anna Laura and Jill for this workplace training, the domains could be completely different. They could be whatever the trainers decided that they wanted the domains to be. So it would be relative to nursing issues. And then the keywords that would be set up would be relative to nursing issues. But the system and the way that you would apply it would be exactly the same. So it's an external tool that could be, you wouldn't even have to play a game. You could just use this as a visualization pre and post test, for a regular 2D kind of a training event.
I apologize for sounding at all critical, but that helps me understand that what you were demonstrating was an example of a type of training that would then be adapted. It almost sounded like these were somewhat absolutes that one would use with any training group, and I got confused from the beginning on that particular point.
Not good that you were confused. Good that you clarified. Thanks, John. Because yes, this is completely customizable. So we're just looking at one example, but this could be used by anyone for any other purpose, not certainly limited to workplace sensitivity and compliance training issues. Okay, well I'm going to extinguish this, and Anna Laura and Cecilia, are you guys ready to go?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, I'm ready to log in. Shall I log in, Jen?
Sure, go ahead. So what we're going to do next, Catherine and John, is the three of us are going to show you a demo of an abbreviated demo of the game, and it takes a little bit of setup and a little bit of practice to do this. So I think that as the next step after this presentation, if it seems like we have something here that is of interest for Catherine to go forward with, then we might want to have another training session now that we've overviewed what the thing is, of really teaching Catherine how to use it so that we could take whatever the next step might be with that. So we're just going to do this demo. So what we're looking at is in the web browser, you can see I have a web page up. I've launched the game, and the game is asking me to enter my login and hit enter to submit. So the login that I'm going to enter is the one that I used when I created my profile back in that PHP panel, that screenshot that we looked at earlier. So in this case, who am I?
Tom.
I'm Tom. Okay. So I enter Tom. And now I'm going to enter my password, which is Tom. And now I'm Tom, and you can see my thumbnail down at the bottom of the screen. And the master trainer is Julie, and you can see her thumbnail right here. And then the assistant trainer is Mike. And so Julie is Anna Laura, and Mike is Cecilia, and I'm Tom. So what I'm going to go through now is some interactions that happen in this workplace environment. On the left, I have a chat dialog. Everything that occurs in the chat dialog is going to be captured in the database. So when we're done with the training, what we're going to be able to do is I'm going to have a post-training discussion with Anna Laura and Cecilia, or well, I'm not going to, but we would. And we would be able to scroll through the entire chat dialogue that occurred so that we could discuss about various decisions that I made or failed to make as a result of the training. And the training that we're doing is compliance training for AB 1825, harassment and discrimination in California. So I'm on a mission, and I won't play the audio file, I'll just give you the 30-second summary of the mission. I'm here as a consultant for this company, and I'm an expert on harassment and discrimination. And what I'm supposed to do is go around the company and identify places that may be of concern, and that could be people, that could be things that I interact with in the environment, like an inappropriate poster on the wall, whatever it might be. And that's my motivation then to achieve and to score, is that my mission design is that as the player of the game, I'm supposed to go into this company and identify problems so that I can give a report to the owners. Is there anything you want to add to that, Anna Laura, about what I'm doing?
No, I think that sounds great.
Okay. So right now I'm looking through the main camera at the lobby, and that's Anna, the receptionist, and she's my point of contact and my point of help. And I can orbit my camera around here in the lobby where I first came onto the game, and I can see off into the distance other parts of the company. I also have some other cameras that allow me to switch locations. So right now that's me, and I'm standing here in front of the receptionist, but I can change my camera by hitting another key. So I'm going to, for instance, change to F5. And when what happened? I'll be right back, you guys.
And Mike, we're going to be in the break room.
You are?
Mike's going to, that's where we're going to interact, right?
Okay. I'm going to go to the break room.
Oh, Mike's got to get there first.
Oh. Something all of a sudden is wrong with the break room camera.
Oh, I use the room camera all right.
You were able to use it okay? So I just hit F7, and that camera takes me to the conference room. So I can orbit my camera, and I can zoom in, and I can zoom out. I'm going to hit F8, and that takes me to the office area. Hit F6, and that takes me to what's now empty cubicles. F4. Something my keyboard on this machine doesn't like. How about if we go to the office instead of the break room?
Okay.
Anywhere we like. Yep.
Okay. So now, how I navigate around, I'm going to show you. Here's my Tom character. If I want my Tom character, for example, to go into the conference room, I'm going to zoom way out and get the dollhouse kind of a view. I can reach into the conference room and just left click. And now you can see that my Tom character is walking toward the door of the conference room, and he's going to go in. So now I can either use a camera that is directly over my avatar, or I can shift cameras to now what is the break room. And here's my character Tom in the break room. So how I navigate him around is I just click on the floor where I want him to go. So now I'm going to cheat a little bit. On the other side of the break room over here is where we want Tom to go. So I'm just going to click on the floor over here by the office. Come on, Tom.
I think clicking on the window doesn't work.
So now we're watching Tom come out of the conference room, and he's walking over to the office. So what would happen, we're going to bypass this, but what would happen is we would watch a video that would be about this scenario that we're about to play out. So I've watched the video and I've answered the question from the video, and now I find myself here in the office. And I'm talking with Mike. So now our scenario begins.
Celia, you're going to run with that, right?
Yeah. Do we need Julie in here?
Not yet. She's going to come in at the most embarrassing point.
Oh, are we doing the sexual harassment one? I thought we were doing the ethnicity one.
Number 4.
Number 4. Oh, the boss is wasted. All right.
So now Cecilia, playing Mike, is typing into the dialogue, and I can see that Mike is talking to me. Normally with the training, you're not on the phone, so this is all by chat.
Okay there, Mike?
Yeah.
Catherine and John, we would have lights over people's heads as they're talking, as they're typing.
And now my response is, I'm saying, really, you're kidding, and I'm surprised. So I'm going to hit this emote button that allows me to append my line of dialogue with the word surprised, which is later going to be captured in the chat dialogue for debrief and also for scoring.
Sorry.
So I've kind of shut this down myself by being a really um, positively responding trainee, and the idea is that, uh, and you have to really be on the receiving end of this to internalize it, is that the two trainers, one of them being the perpetrator and the other being the victim, start to really crank up the stress level, because now Mike, who's played by Cecilia, is going to start attacking Julie, and I have to do something. I have to respond, and if I don't respond, then Mike starts attacking me also, and this gives you an opportunity to, as a trainee in this environment, to develop and practice coping mechanisms, ways of responding to this kind of a situation happening in the workplace, and then later on, based upon what I said or didn't say, then the two trainers can also talk with me about different ways that I can develop other approaches and other methods for dealing with this problem. So then we would continue on through this scenario and the other three scenarios, each of which happens in a different location, and each of these scenarios targets a different issue for 1825 compliance. So there's ethnicity and ageism, and then also sexual orientation.
So, Mike, this is Catherine. So, Tom is the trainee here, and he is observing or interacting with this dialogue all via text.
Correct. This is all entirely text-based, as well as I have this list of actions that I can make my character do different movements, and then I have these emotional responses that I can say, this is not any fun, and then that's appended with anger, so I can communicate even more strongly than I have actions available how I'm trying to let people know I feel in my chat dialogue. But yes, this is all by chat. Which then, one of the things that's really useful about this in terms of it being an online training product is that by the design of this, there is no need at all for any kind of certain network bandwidth or connectivity. I mean, you could almost play this by dial-up. It's so lightweight. It's all by text. Anything that you are opening up in the game has been downloaded to the web browser. So our ability to send text back and forth and to move our avatars around by clicking on the floor has made this a game that's really easy for us to use at a distance in support of a normal online class.
And so the two trainers, Julie and Mike, their lines are pre-scripted.
Well, we get ourselves started. For example, Mike just starts off attempting to engage the participant in conversation, but we never really know what the participant's going to say or do. So we have some idea of where we'd like to try to take the participant, but it's really completely up to that trainee who's in there. We try to turn it back onto the participant to have to do something if it's the type of person who does I don't know kind of responses. If the trainee jumps in and shuts Mike down before Julie even walks in the room, then Julie's going to have normal everyday conversation, and it's not going to be about this topic at all. And Tom will have handled it artfully and quickly, which is desirable. So so much is contingent on what the trainee does.
And this exact tool is easily resituated. So, for instance, an insurance company or a bank, like with Bank of America, if you have procedural training that you want to do, then this dialogue that has the same capacity that it would when we're trying to do something like harassment.
Right. Well, I can see where something, like harassment, which goes across all, the law applies to everyone the same, could certainly be used this way, I guess. So this is done real time then with the individual?
It's real time. Cecilia and I are sitting here creating this dialogue with Jim as we speak. So the trainee needs an appointment with trainers, and we need people who are qualified to be trainers. And on Cecilia's behalf, let me just say that she hasn't been a trainer. She's filling in here. This is the first time she's ever been in this scenario, so she was already just jumping in and giving it her best sleaze she could come up with.
Now it's entirely possible to have a different kind of a deployment. So in this case, this is intended to be an immersive management trainer, a training the trainer situation. So as a company, for instance, um, any medium-sized company in California, we want to have some immersive training for our management staff, and we're going to make that investment because it's going to cost more than just doing a 2-hour online course. And they really get an intensive experience at the hands of two live experienced trainers. But you could have a building full of people that are all doing interactions in the building with bots, with characters that are here that are responding as in response to a branching scenario that you have created, that you have scripted for those characters. So this is by preference, it's not a limitation. This could easily be single player versus the entire building by artificial intelligence.
And it also could be somewhere in between, where we could have one trainer, say Julie in here, and we could have other trainees, a dozen trainees or whatever it might be, depending on how large we make the game, sitting around a conference table doing stand-up training the same way they would in face-to-face environment, taking questions from people, putting them through role plays on their own, any way that you would, any configuration where you'd want to get a group of people together and do it in here, we could do it. But we really liked the 2-on-1 in terms of putting a person under pressure to actually have to say or do what they would do in an awkward situation rather than speculate about it, because you're probably familiar with what happens in sexual harassment type situations or any of these sensitivity issues, and that is you think about it, you think you know the right thing to do, but you're usually caught off guard when something actually happens, and so you don't speak up or you don't say what you wish you would have, and you have 20/20 hindsight perhaps, but you don't actually do it. So for this particular topic, we really liked the 2-on-1 intensive.
One of the first questions that we're often asked is about using voice over IP as the interface for the game rather than chat. And there's a with every design issue, there's always some kind of a trade-off. So the fact that we're doing text allows our trainers to assume any kind of personality and avatar. So while both of our SME happen to be women, they can easily assume the identity of a man in this environment. As soon as you do that by live voice, then that suspension of disbelief is broken. Another trade-off is that if we do this by text, you can play this from anywhere with any kind of bandwidth. If you want to do voice over IP, then we've changed that bandwidth consideration, and anybody that's going to be involved in the game then has to have a pretty robust connection to the web. And if that degrades at all during the training, then they disconnect, and that's a pretty disruptive kind of a thing. But that said, you could develop a game if you weren't concerned about changing genders. You could develop a game that was voice over IP supplemented with text, and you could also do, as we often do when we're working on this, use the conferencing system, phone system external to the game as a assistance.
Jim, an example that you're describing there that I can picture in real life is you've got an insurance company, and the insurance company is trying to train its repair assessment group about a new technique and how they arrive at a figure to repair a car or something like that. You don't care, certainly in that case, whether it's a man or a woman. It could be the real person. You don't have to role play as such. It's much more straightforward, just straight out delivery of instruction.
Right, and that kind of procedural training is very easily done with much less design difficulty than this kind of we tackled about the most difficult subject that I could think of that you could take on.
I believe that. And I think that to then try to step back and go, okay, let's do something more. Not that you should do that, but I think, like logically, Catherine's application is going to be a lot more mundane instruction, if you will, and then the orientation of let's now have our trainers learn how they can use this tool to develop their own training as they are the instructional designers for the company. That's, I think, Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong, where in this particular instance or application this would go.
Well, that's one application is for a specific client, but the more broad application is for things that I want to set up to make them available to practitioners without them having to go to a physical location.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I'm building a orientation to EWD specifically for faculty. So to try to educate and inform faculty about the benefits of economic and workforce development programs, how they can get involved, where they can, how they can access grants and those kinds of things. And so I want to have that available in an online setting so that they could go to it any time that's convenient for their schedule. That's kind of one of the ways I'm looking at it. Things that don't need to be done in stand-up or face-to-face, but are readily available when somebody has the opportunity.
And would you say then that they would not need to be done in real time?
That's what I'm wondering. Probably some wouldn't need to be real time. Some could be, static because the information isn't going to change. Questions from the participant might change, however.
Mm-hmm.
We might get a different source of questions, from. And I suppose you could handle that in different ways. They could submit their questions via chat and get a response back in 24 hours or something like that if we didn't have a real time there during their session. I'm afraid that real-time person is going to have to be me or someone that I contract with to be that real-time person.
And therefore, the real-time component is not really a practical consideration. Quite the contrary, in that particular case, you'd want to have it be asynchronous.
Yes. Probably for my application. Now, for the company that I'm looking at, as you mentioned, John, they had several desires, and they train people from all over their company. One of them is the one to figure out the claim and, what it's going to be. So those kinds of things would be a little different. But their primary interest for us is to train their trainers in how to utilize this type of technology to be effective in their particular environment.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other questions that we can answer for you, Catherine, about this particular product?
Well, I don't. Again, I don't even know enough to ask. Is it how? I guess probably my question is how long does it take? I mean, you've got several scenarios in this one, for example, and total time on this would be what? Possibly a 3-4 hour session if somebody went through all scenarios. And how long would it take to develop something like that?
Well, we were looking at the 2-hour mandate from 1825 as being kind of the target for this.
Right.
But you could make it longer or shorter as needed.
Okay.
Um,
And then
To answer your question, because it's a really good one, about what does it require in terms of development, the development time and the development cost for us is now almost entirely about the time that it takes for the people that are the experts in the training content to design the training and help us situate the training. So if it's a situation like you had, let's say you had a bunch of canned training that you were already doing face to face, for example, instructor led, and that just needs to be resituated, then the time to do that is relatively short, and the cost to do that is relatively low if we repurpose, the assets that we already have. If you have something that is along the lines of what we've been doing here for sensitivity training, it could be pretty expensive and take some time. Pretty expensive, taking some time being, it could be anywhere from a year to 18 months to develop, and could have a budget pretty easily of $120,000 or $140,000.
That would be for pretty much creating a customized
Right.
game.
That would be for a customized, instructor-led,
Starting from scratch.
starting from scratch, scenario-based kind of a training.
And I would assume that, well, actually every instance would be different, but obviously if you develop your content up front, which you just about have to do to get into something like this, hopefully you've debugged it, you've delivered it, you know that it's intact, so at least you don't have a lot of the, no, that's not really what we had in mind after all, out of the way, because that's already been taken care of.
Right. Right.
Right. So
And-
if I were to provide you with some workshops, that I've been offering, and I don't see it being real usable for anything longer than a few hour kind of training,
Uh-huh.
rather than something that is, for example, our customer service academy train the trainer curriculum takes 16 hours to deliver. So that would be something that we probably wouldn't want to spend the money on doing virtually.
Portion of the customer service could be great in an interactive environment like this. An hour of it, something to be demonstrated for the room or part of it is this way, and this is like an on-screen role play where people could deal with difficult customers.
And that practice is as good in game as it would be in real life. A difficult customer is a difficult customer, no matter where it is.
You could have your participants attend remotely for that portion of the training. So that might be a day or a half a day when they would not need to show up on premises. Am I off base on that, Catherine, or does that make sense?
Well, I'm thinking that in two terms. One is when we do the train the trainer, we go through, there's 10 modules of training. Each one has up to 8 hours of instruction in them. So, but the trainers and the client that contract with the colleges to deliver this training, for example, contract for their specific needs. So they may not do all 10 modules, and their employees may only go through 4 of the modules of 4 hours each, rather than all 10 modules at 8 hours each. So way that might work, but I think that the cost would be prohibitive to do something like that.
And it's
Thinking of more of my orientation things that are only, where it's more expensive to go and do a face-to-face for an hour and a half than it is to develop the online and have it accessible.
right.
Yeah, because otherwise, you'd have to bring all these people there, and even though the training's only an hour and a half, it takes half a day for them to get there, to be there, to go back to work, and essentially it costs them a half a day of work productivity where they could be right at their desk, take it at their desk, and get their questions. Cost to them, to leave their work environment and go to a face.
And there's a strong likelihood that for any given situation, the best solution is a combination of tools. So it could be a combination of an online course that also has some canned web presentations and streaming video, combined with some interactives that you work through self-paced, and then different capstone events perhaps that you do in a game environment. So sometimes there's the best solution is a variety of components that are going to be integrated.
Absolutely, I can see that.
Do you have a sense of whether your customers, your clients are interested in doing something online rather than entirely face-to-face? Has there been any survey or feedback from them in any way?
Feedback has been, I did a survey of 100, actually it got sent out to a lot of faculty, and I got about 100 responses last year indicating that they would be interested in some online.
That's for the faculty, that's for the orientation for EW.
For the orientation, right. And then, people are always looking at ways to limit their travel costs and those kinds of things as far as attending training goes and taking things, online. For example, I don't know if you've gotten any kind of speeding violations and done any online traffic like that. It's easier to do at home at your own pace as you have time to fit it in, rather than to spend 8 hours in an in-person training class. So that kind of thing. So I'm just looking at different ways to deliver things that we deliver kind of on an ongoing basis, and things that get kind of set aside on the shelf if we don't offer them on a regular basis because of the expense of taking them out to everybody and setting them all up and getting a facility. And I'd really like to make some of these things more readily available.
Well, as a next step for us, if you have something, after you have some time to noodle it a little bit, if you have something that you think would be a good particular to take a look at, then why don't we do that? Why don't we take a look at some particular workshop or training evolution that you think might be a good fit, and discuss what some solutions might be?
That's a really good idea. I'm working on right now with my designer. I'm working on the content for our orientation, and we're going to be delivering it at a couple of different conferences coming up. So we'll have been able to work out the bugs and those kinds of things. And that might be something that I could send to you and have you take a look at it and see, give me an estimate of what it would be and what it would take to put something like that in this type of a scenario.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
I think you can change the scenarios, and you can change the work environment and those kinds of things.
And that's the easiest thing to change. So now that we have our architecture all in place, changing what the avatars look like and what the environments are that they're in is something that is really easy. I mean, these could be, minimum wage workers at McDonald's as easily as they are, management professionals in this building.
Another thing, Catherine, is the customer service modules that you talk about. If there are a couple of those that are pretty much dead on the shelf because they've been cost prohibitive, if you want to send them over for us to just glance at and see if we see a natural fit, we could do that.
Yeah, and it's not so much that they're dead on the shelf. It's just I only offer them twice a year just because it takes a lot of logistics and travel money and things like that to deliver a 2-day training session. One north-south, and scheduling around the trainer and people's schedules and all of those kinds of things. So it would would be desirable to have that more readily available, but because we don't give the curriculum to anyone who doesn't go through the train the trainer, it limits people's ability to offer the training without having to identify where there's a local trainer that they could use.
Right.
But that sounds like one of the crying reasons for attempting to do something that is a package type instruction because of those very things, Catherine.
Yeah.
If it could be done, and I really think the idea of trying to put something together as or even look at and have this team look at possible delivery scenarios for what is otherwise a packaged curriculum would be, and instructor-led curriculum, I think would be an interest. They're offering something that could really have an interesting return.
Yeah, and it gets more complicated as the curriculum goes too, because it does utilize quite a number of videos.
Mm-hmm.
Some are a few minutes long, and they have scenarios of different scenes happening in customer interaction, and then there's longer ones and those kinds of things, and up to videos that are used. And I think there's something like 8 videos used throughout the course of the entire program. Mm-hmm. So that kind of stuff then gets more complicated because you have to then stop and have time to go access that video. We'd have to get permission from the publisher of the video to stream it or whatever
Right.
There's challenges in that respect. I'm probably thinking, but for the company that I'm talking to right now, they have their curriculum already developed as well. So it could be, Jim, that what we would do is have you talk to them directly. I did invite her to come to the training to see this demonstration today, but she wasn't available. So might need to do this again or talk to her a little bit more about what their desires are. Basically, what she indicated to me is how they can train their internal trainers to do some online and virtual types of training and to design and deliver that. So.
Well, what might really be good in terms of optimizing everybody's time and availability is, I'm going to turn off recording right now, is if you send the